Didn't mean to give you all that anticipation with a 30-second counter. Joe here, Psychedelics. Today we're joined by Kristin, Nash, and Erica Siegel. We're going to talk about risk reduction, harm reduction, and a really cool project that Kristin's working on. How are you both doing today?
Great. Thank you, Joe, so much.
I'm doing great. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I have the Nest sticker ready to go here on my cup.
Oh, thanks.
So I'm very excited to chat with you both. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. One that there's a lot of nuance to, but some of us think there's more straightforward answers than others. Those of us backed by science kind of, I think, are clearing, having the best ideas here. So let's, Kristin, can you give us a little bit of an intro on yourself, and then we'll flip that over to Erica?
Yes. Again, thanks so much, Joe, for hosting the conversation. And the only thing I would change about your intro is that we're definitely trying to reduce risk, but actually we're also trying to improve outcomes, optimize outcomes, and intentionality. So I would just maybe add that framing up front. So for me, I am a public health professional. I've worked actually in harm reduction in sexual and reproductive health in the African context. So in a country, Malawi, worked a lot on HIV, harm reduction, preventing child marriage and teen pregnancy. So was sort of doing harm reduction professionally when I lost my 21-year-old son just over 5 years ago in an accident related to psychedelics use. So, and I can talk about that more in a minute, but that's in a nutshell, who I am.
Thanks, Kristin. Erica?
Hi, everyone. I'm Erica Siegel. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I founded two organizations, one being Nest Harm Reduction, where we do psychedelic therapy, PrEP integration, and work with people who are trying to improve their relationship with substances. So we work from a really non-abstinence-based model, drug education model. We also have a contract with the California Health and Human Services to do Narcan distribution and fentanyl testing strip distribution. We also do event services and outreach. I am calling in from High Vibe Fest in Weldon, California right now, where we'll be running a 24-hour sanctuary until Monday morning, where hopefully we will assist people in any challenging experiences and difficulties that might arise during this weekend, whether they are substance related or not. And then 2 years ago, I founded Shine Collective, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that works with people who have been abused or assaulted or have experienced extreme trauma in psychedelic communities. And I am honored to be a friend of Kristin's and working on the steering committee for her campaign the Coalition for Psychedelic Safety and Education's campaign, Before You Trip. And happy to be here and have this conversation. And anytime I get to talk to either of you, I feel so privileged and blessed. And when I get to talk to both of you at the same time, it's like, icing on the cake. And so really happy to be here.
All right, this is awesome. So digging in a little further, Kristin, could you share a bit about what brought you here?
Yes. And before I go there, I just want to say that I actually met Erica, 3 or 4 years ago when she hosted the first, maybe the first ever psychedelic safety conference, sort of bringing together professionals who were interested in ethics and safety and harm reduction from many different perspectives and lenses. And I was new to the space then, and I was just so inspired by Erica's convening power and you know, the incredible folks she brought together. So that's how the two of us met. And I actually opened that conference with my story. So the way I got here was, as I said, my son, who was 21 at the time, Will, just an incredibly curious, brilliant, introspective young man about to graduate from college. He had a job waiting. He had just started his own business doing collaboratives with artists, creating streetwear. He was just a really cool human being. And just the kind of young person who would experiment with psychedelics. He had a really, I guess you could say, I would call it an adverse event in public health, a challenging experience. He went into a psychosis and became violent toward his friends. He was in his own home. He was with a small group of his best friends. They were really scared, tried to calm him down. They called for help. The campus first responders didn't know what it meant to be in a psychedelic crisis. They treated it like they were breaking up a fight, which made it worse. And he was able to harm himself with two campus responders standing over him. And afterward, talking to his friends, they said, like, we never dreamed things could go so sideways. These are, and they had taken, like, just to be really clear, and everything is super well documented through police reports and autopsy records. But they had taken a half tab of LSD at like 3:30 in the afternoon, and they were just chilling, couple beers, and then they had 2 grams, I think, is that right? 2 grams of psilocybin, like around midnight. And so, I don't know, I guess judge for yourselves how much that is in that context. But his friends, like, just never dreamed things could go so sideways, right? These are supposed to be safe, natural, the least harmful drugs. And so for me in that moment 5 years ago, it was, you know, Michael Pollan's book. It was Paul Stamets' movie. I guess it wasn't his movie, but you know what I mean? Fantastic Fungi. It was so much excitement, like warranted excitement around clinical research and policy change. And for me in that moment, I was reading the good news and the promise, but I wasn't seeing much, if anything, about risk or why it's important to approach with intention and key harm reduction practices. To me, that was missing. So from a public health perspective, that just seemed like a gap that I couldn't ignore. Fast forward, we've created this campaign, which I can tell you about, called Before You Trip. Erica's been instrumental in that. Maybe I'll pause there and let you ask another question. I could go in a lot of directions, but that's how I got here. Yeah.
Amazing. Erica, anything you'd like to add about Kristin's organization?
I was really moved by Kristin's story. And when we did the Nest conference in 2022, which feels like forever ago, and I can't believe it's only been 2.5 years. But I felt like it was, I was seeing all of these amazing stories and these like rose-colored glasses media of like, we are going to change the world. And also really seeing the stories of harm and the stories of things that could go wrong being rejected or silenced or gaslit or and it was heartbreaking to watch people in these states of deep grief and loss then be rejected, ostracized, like and silenced by the greater psychedelic community. and really had inspired a lot of my work. I've been doing mental health crisis response at music festivals for over a decade, and have seen everything under the sun, including lots of different psychedelic-induced psychotic states, and could see how without proper training, without proper infrastructure, without teams of even friends who know what to do, like that this is like people are going to get hurt, people are going to die, like, right, that's part of the drug war, is people are going to die. And my goal is to how to prevent that from happening in all sorts of scenarios, include everything from recreational use to intentional use, ceremonial use, and in the medical model, which, you know, they like everything has pros and cons. And so when Kristin reached out to me about the Coalition for Psychedelic Safety and Education and the campaign that they were doing, I was so inspired by the work, and so excited to have more organizations that weren't saying, you know, drugs are bad or drugs are good, but it's just like, let's give you all of the information that you possibly can. I am the brand of neurodivergent that is like more information better, like all information better all the time. And so the more we can give people proper information around risk and benefit and safety and how to support friends and families and how to have conversations around psychedelic use. When we see so many people, when we see these, you know, Instagram advertisements being like, this is going to change your life, and there's no safety data. There's no like, and also it could cause severe dysregulation. It could cause a lot of disruption in your home life without proper support around it. And that support can look like so many different things. And so really happy to see more people kind of get on the curiosity train. Let's get curious about what these things can do.
I love that. And absolutely. I think, yeah, we have been in a hype cycle. There's no doubt around that. Right. And I think we started talking about things like HPPD and trauma really early. Our co-founder Kyle has experienced it, is still experiencing it 15 years later. So it's not been something we hide here at Psychedelics today. And yeah, we also talk about things that are really risky, like this spiritual emergence phenomenon that we need a better name for. Like this, and we've prototyped a few names, but like I forget them now. But you know, it's something that we're thinking about regularly here at PT. And like, you know, when people go into these really intense states, how do we hold them? Like this is also going to happen. And it's not always at a festival where there's, you know, good harm reduction like Nest available to like support them for a bit. And in some cases, people need support for like a long time, a couple months. And that's not really available. I think as I was watching Oregon get really exciting around legalization, that's when I started saying, hey, we really need a network of these facilities that can catch people, because putting them in a psychiatric facility is not helpful. It's actually quite harmful. But what is that non-psychiatric container? Kyle spent a lot of time at a spin-off of Diabasis House called Soteria in Vermont. So it was like kind of peer-led
Amazing
support for first break psychosis in a non-clinical frame. And that happened after Hurricane Sandy, where actual hospitals were broken. Like people couldn't be at hospitals. So they had to get experimental, and they had a lot of success. And, you know, people could be on or off their meds, like whatever they chose. And they had great results just to have a safe place to be and play it out for a while. So anyway, that's just, go ahead.
I was just going to say what you're doing here, Joe, is so important, because you're creating an informed subculture. And as psychedelics now are going into the mainstream, there aren't enough of those to support all the new curious people, right, who are using the New York Times article or How to Change Your Mind as their guidebook, right? And so I think that's part of what we're trying to do is, as these go mainstream, try to meet people where they are on social platforms. But just the community that you're building here, one of intention and education and full transparency and balance, is such a critical part of that. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. And a core thing for the whole time has been the drug war, because
Yeah.
if we hadn't spent $1 trillion since the 70s on the war on drugs, imagine what kind of safe containers and helpful use cases we would have been able to implement by now, even without all that much funding. We're swimming against such an intense, like, enmeshed propaganda, or colonization from the drug war. That how can we think sensibly as a culture around this? And it takes folks like yourselves and all of us to like make it reasonable. Go ahead.
I love to just like put a fine point on that, because I do believe, when I look at the night my son died and I look at all the safety nets that were broken or weren't there to begin with, the fact that these substances were illegal, that he was on a college campus where there were punitive consequences, made a difference in his friend's willingness to call for help, made a difference that they kept it on campus and didn't call 911. That could have had a better, or at least a better trained response. Maybe part of it is training, and that's right. So I think we need, when we think about shifting policy, absolutely lives will be saved. And also at the same time, the reason, because you asked me how I came to this space, and one of the reasons was in California, there was some legislation running, and the politicians leading that legislation were literally quoted and standing up in meetings saying, these are safe, natural, and the least harmful drugs. And there's, why wouldn't we legalize these and hard stop? So I guess for me, right, I'm trying to advocate for policy change and also advocate for sort of reality-based, accurate messaging when we do that, so that people understand the reasons, why they need to engage with care.
So you made a interesting couple points, and I want to, see where this goes. Like, obviously, science always needs to be replicated and updated when we can afford to. I don't know if we're going to be able to afford science anymore, but Dr. David Nutt was hired by, or like paid, the study was paid for by the UK government to make a drug harm scale that was science-based, because drug policy historically has not been based on any science whatsoever. So this drug harm scale came out in roughly 2009 or 10, I think in the Lancet, and it showed that I think buprenorphine was the safest of these drugs that they studied, and they compared harm to self and others, alcohol being the most radically harmful. I have a fun line, Kristin. Alcohol's hurt my family almost as much as the Catholic Church has. Boom.
That resonates.
But like,
Yeah.
I'm there, and like, I don't really love that drug. It's probably my least favorite out of all of these things. And then, drug 2 and 3 were respectively psilocybin and LSD, right? So we have this kind of like one study. Nobody's ever come out and said, let's replicate this study, as far as I can tell, or improve on the methodology. But go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say on that study and then we'll talk about the campaign, but part of the problem with that study is our framework for how we think about harms is very much the physiology and the toxicity. So we think about harms in terms of alcohol, which we have this extensive canon. We understand it in academia. And so we're like applying that framework to these substances, which have really a different set of harms, right? That include psychological, emotional, spiritual, physical accidents, as we've been discussing. So that's one problem I have with that study. Not to mention it doesn't include incidents. So the use of alcohol is ubiquitous in our society, whereas at least at the time of that study, the psychedelics, and I'm not trying to suggest that they're as harmful as alcohol. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the framing has to be different, and we need a different lens to think about harms.
And to build on that, Kristin, thank you. Like, correct, right? That was like that harm scale that David Nutt put out was societal harm, right? Like harm to others, and then harm to body, harm to self.
It was purely physiological, so
right,
psychological stuff was not included.
Right, was not included. And the amount of challenging experiences, psychological dysregulation, even lifestyle changes, right? We partnered with a Jewish organization called OK Clarity. That's a group of Jewish therapists to talk about religious use amongst psychedelics. And if somebody takes psychedelics and decides that they want to shift their relationship to their religion, to spirituality, to the relationship with God, it has a far more challenging profile and impact on community systems, familial support, things like that, that like never even was considered when the harm scale came out. And so we really need to start looking at the psychological harm, the harm of poorly integrated experiences, including ego inflation, including overuse. You know, we see this in some of our high net worth public individuals right now, where there might be some overuse of psychedelic substances and causes these really big states of ego inflation and delusion. And, you know, it's people are living in multiple realities, living in multiple timelines, opening up portals that they don't know how to close, interacting with spirits, or having hallucinations, or having conversations with things that aren't there, that are causing some really damaging societal impacts.
So
and none of that was considered.
Right.
Go ahead.
Okay. I would love to dig in and do like a multi-part series at some point critiquing that study so that it can inform future studies, because obviously it's been far too long and we have a lot more data now. And so Kristin, right before we jump into talking about your organization, do you have like a definition you like to work with, like given you're an MPH, like how do we define harm?
I think that is the question, you know, and I can shed some light on it. There are a lot of people thinking about it. That was part of what they were trying to do at the Psychedelic Safety Institute Summit, like, is to bring the field together for a common definition. So they're working on that. Also, the RAND study did it, but I think it's got to be self-defined, right? So is a challenging experience harmful? Right? We know that sometimes those can be incredibly transformative and very positive. So we don't put that in the category of harm, but something that is from your individual perspective, unwanted, negative, and lasting beyond the trip, is considered harm. So again, that can be physical harm, can be trauma, accidents, and fatalities. That can be psychological and emotional, spiritual, ontological. What am I missing, Erica? Sexual abuse, I think, manipulation and abuse.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the ontological one gets me because I'm like, I come from philosophy, so I'm like, of course people should be challenging their ontologies, but I understand that can be fucking earth shattering for people too. Yeah, go ahead, Erica.
And I mean, there are, there's also this like relational harm, right? One of the things that, and Shine will be coming out with this summer, but one of the things that I see time and time again is this like trusting untrustworthy people, right?
I don't know how
like
people just give trust away so quickly here. It freaks me out.
Right, and oftentimes that is built within our early childhood experiences, where a lot of people were raised with the shame of being able to trust themselves. It's like you trust a leader, you trust your parents, you trust your teachers, and like what happens when those people do not have good intentions, when those people cannot hold safety for you as an individual. And the rhetoric or the implantation of early childhood development around don't trust yourself is so strong, especially in evangelical radicalized religions. And so if you were raised in, and this is not just, it's all religions, right? Or all kind of cult dynamics, even especially in the spirituality, new age community, like guruism of trusting the leader instead of trusting yourself. And like, if that was instilled in you at a very young age, this idea of going into a psychedelic therapeutic container to access your inner healer, like most people don't actually know how to do that and have been told that that is wrong. And so we're not even setting people up for success when they're going into psychedelic experiences, and to be able to have like inner access to be able to trust themselves. And so then they just give it away to other people all the time. And it can be so incredibly harmful, and so incredibly damaging when you trust a therapist, when you trust a religious leader, when you trust an intimate partner, and you are manipulated, coerced, taken advantage of. And I just think that type of harm is this nuanced moral injury that we are seeing in adverse events. Which is, I read all the things. I read the Michael Pollan book. I thought that this was going to help, and then the person I went to for help violated me in some way. And then when I spoke out about it, the community gaslit me and told me that it was my fault, and ostracized me or kicked me out or what, like, and that has so much more psychological damage than the actual impact of the psychedelic. But it is the community harm that comes from having an adverse event in psychedelics.
Yeah, I'll save an abuse story for after. But Kristin, I want to jump into let's talk about your project. Like, it's really, really cool.
Thank you. And I just, Erica, what you just said is so important. And I think, again, underscores the reason why we need balanced education, because when they don't understand the vulnerable, suggestible state that you're in, there's less of an understanding about why you have to choose someone you trust. So I just think that's so important. And I would just say to Joe, as a setup, I mean, for me, it's like, we know that use of psychedelics is increasing. People are curious, they're interested, they're excited. It's amazing. It's wonderful. So many people, the majority of people are being helped. And but we know there's, a percentage of people who experience harm, and we've been talking a lot about that. And I just want to point to the fact that we really don't have good prevalence data on harms. I think you and I had an exchange pointing to Otto Simonson's 2023 paper as sort of the best we've got in terms of, US nationally representative data. That study, according to that study, about 1 in 10 psychedelics users have ever experienced an unwanted event. We could say a harmful event that lasted days, weeks, or months or longer. So that kind of puts, because I think a lot of people also don't realize, a lot of people I talk to are like, well, why is this necessary? Like, how, it's so rare, and so I don't like to use the word rare because I don't know what it means, but and I will say David Yaden and his colleagues at Johns Hopkins are working on better prevalence data, but I just want to point out, like, we don't even really
the number,
know.
like 4.5% that you gave me, like people have like unwanted, aka harmful kind of reactions in
Well, in the
Simonson
article, that could be a different data point. In the Simonson article, it's 8.9% experience extended difficulties, and it's like something like 2.5% actually have to go for medical or psychiatric care. So that data point, yeah.
And if millions of people are taking psychedelics and 9% of them are having extended difficulties, like that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people that need to get treated. That's a lot of people that don't have the resources and the support that they're going to need to get through this, and it's only increasing.
Right.
So that's the point. As use increases, that it's just math. So it's like, how can we reduce preventable harm while also, like we said in the beginning, optimizing beneficial outcomes? And so that's what we're trying to do with this campaign called Before You Trip. It's, again, for me, I really believe education should either precede or at least be in parallel to policy change. But we know, use is happening regardless of legal status. So in my mind, we need this everywhere right now, all at once. But we're starting small. So we're piloting now in Colorado, where these have been state legal since 2022. We're piloting in 18 to 30-year-olds, so a cohort of the Gen Z population where use of these substances has almost tripled in the last decade. We're in Denver, Boulder, and Aspen, taking very much a harm reduction approach. So not encouraging or discouraging use, not telling people what they should do. From a public health perspective, though, doing more than just providing harm reduction, like here's how to trip safely, right? So we're taking it upstream to like how to even think about if psychedelics are right for you, and are they right for you right now, right? Because as we know, our mindset, our emotions, our setting changes from day to week to month. So almost like helping a young person take an inventory for themselves to kind of think about things like, have I reviewed my health history? What's my intention? And again, no intention is right or wrong, whether it's recreation or self-discovery. But knowing that intention can help you kind of think about, is this the right answer for me right now? How do I process uncertainty? So, kind of helping step through some of those key questions. And then we have a website with those questions. We also on the website have science-based, evidence-based information on individual substances because, right, from ketamine to MDMA to LSD, DMT, they're really different risk-benefit profiles to understand. So we've got that all in a website. I think the most exciting part of the campaign is that we're using social platforms and we're using content creators to deliver messages in a really resonant way. We have engaged Gen Z from the outset. So from college students at 2 different universities, we've got Gen Z on our steering committee. We also did market research in Gen Z to make sure that from the messaging to the creators to the creative itself, would resonate. And so that launched in early May. We've got 6 content creators. I wish I could play a video for your followers, but I will say you can follow us on Instagram at beforeyoutrip_, and you can check out all the videos, and please leave comments, ask questions. We're getting ready to do a partnership with Rick Strassman, like Tips from Rick, where Gen Z can just ask, whatever you want, and get the straight scoop. So again, it's been a really fine line to walk. This idea of not promoting, not hyping, and also not fear mongering. And so we've just had to check ourselves at every turn to really thread that needle. Yeah. So I'm sure I left out something, but that's it in a nutshell.
I mean, I want to hop in on that to also, bring some awareness into the post-COVID loneliness epidemic and how so many people don't even feel like they have friends that they can call on if they need support, right? If you don't feel like you can do that, taking psychedelics is not probably the right time for you, because if something goes wrong, you're going to need supportive community to get you through it. And if there's so many individuals in Gen Z who feel like they don't really have a friend that they can rely on, or a trusted family system, support system where they can actually if you're going through some pretty big reframing post psychedelic experience and you don't have anybody to work with, this is why, peer support groups, integration groups, working with a therapist, coming up with a safety plan. Okay, have I thought about if things go really wonky, what am I going to do? Is, I think, one of the most important parts of psychedelic preparation.
Right. Have you thought about all scenarios is one of our key questions. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I really love this campaign, especially with the 18 to 30-year-olds. I really think that it can make a significant impact on psychedelic safety and the way that the younger generations are starting to look at these medicines and look at these experiences.
One thing we prime people for in our trainings and our talk tracks is, do you have space for a few days of dysregulation?
Yeah.
If not, maybe now isn't the time, and I love this peer support angle. Do you have friends? Without friends, I don't know if I'd be alive, right? I've been through some things, and even in the last 6 months, I've been through it. I do it kind of by design, because that's kind of how I see my growth path going. But I think that's certainly not for everybody. Some people are cool, being cool as a cucumber, going to their Sunday service, and that's their spiritual thing, right? Not too much dysregulation comes from that, and that's kind of part of the point often. But these things are very specifically perturbers. Things are going to change. In what way? Who knows? And how do you pull that off? Kristin, how was it kind of engaging with some of these folks that you got to contribute to, kind of tell a coherent story, which is what I'm kind of seeing on a lot of websites and video assets?
Yeah. So are you asking about the steering committee specifically?
No, just the content creators specifically.
Okay. Yeah.
How did that go?
Yes. Really interesting. I don't think anyone's ever done this before, and so we had the most amazing, she's called a casting director, going out, right, scouring for possibilities. And initially, the agency was recommending we go out in the psychedelic community for people who are more on brand with that. And we thought, no, right, we're really trying to reach those sort of folks who are newly curious and more finding people out in the culture. And so we had some big names that actually said no because they were nervous about their brand, you know, talking about psychedelics. But we had a lot of people say yes and just felt like this was hugely important. We have a DJ who's in the night scene, and she was like, I am so happy to help uplift this. We have a filmmaker and naturalist who, right, it really was on brand for him. Simone is a drag queen.
Simone, yes.
Right. And right before this launched, her community lost someone to ketamine. And she, you know, just really had a heart for this. You know, we have an artist. So we have like, what we tried to do, and again, it's a pilot, is find, you know, a range of brands and personalities to like really connect with different segments of the population. And what I want to say too is it's a pilot. So the whole point is to test and learn. So we're collecting a lot of analytics around which messages resonate the most. And it's interesting so far, I haven't shared this with anyone yet, but psychedelics are unpredictable is the best performing message, which was sort of surprising, right? And the detail around that message is that
surprising that people bought that as like a helpful thing.
Yeah, a little bit to me, because, you know, we worried like, and we tested it in research, it tested well, but the best testing message in the research was, do you know about setting, and support? So that was the best performing in the test, where people really just want, like, give me the facts. What do I need to know? But now in the campaign, this idea of informing people that, hey, these are powerful tools for self-discovery. You might get what you're looking for, and you might get something really unpredictable, has been the best performing message. So I don't know, it'll be interesting to see what your listeners think about that.
I also want to say, and I'm thrilled that you're doing like the Ask Dr. Rick thing. And I would actually really love to see, and maybe Joe can get behind this as well, is move out of the medical profession and get some people who have been using psychedelics for years, like get some psychonauts. Like I will, like Mitchell Gomez and I will do an AMA around what it's been like to work with active people in recreational spaces, and the things that we've seen and the dysregulation, because we can get all of these doctors and medical professionals and researchers, and they are drug naive individuals. Right. We actually need to get people who are in the scene
right,
who are willing to come forward and willing to have conversations with people who are curious to actually answer the questions from lived experience and not from science and research.
Okay, it sounds like you're volunteering.
Give it to me. I will AMA all day long.
I'll get on stage about all my nonsense. I always do.
We need to have the Q&A.
I mean, last time Joe and I were together was at a fish show. And so, you know, we've been in the scene for a really long time. But I would love to get some people who, you know, were originally in the Grateful Dead parking lots. Get some old timers to like come up and be like, this is what happened to my community. We don't want to see this happen in future generations.
Right.
Because those are the voices that have the lived experience.
Yeah, right. Totally.
But yes, I volunteer as tribute for that.
Okay. Post-pilot number one.
That there has been a multi-decade history of psychedelic harm reduction, like probably greater than 4 decades. When my father was in undergrad at UMass Amherst, there was a psychedelic harm reduction thing similar to Zendo or Nest or whatever. And he brought his younger brother a few times, you know, and that was utilized. UMass Amherst was like
Amazing.
the Northeast, probably psychedelic mecca for a while. Just so many people and so much drugs. And Dead Shows had something similar. I don't know what they called it, but there was a history of that.
Yeah,
Well,
and I was trained by individuals who used to work Grateful Dead parking lots. And I have been, doing this work recreationally, like in recreational spaces for almost 2 decades now. And given that 95% of psychedelic users are taking substances in recreational spaces, like this is actually those are the voices that have the lived experience. And when we were, Kristin, when you and I were at Emory with Roman Politsky, and Emory is doing a year-long study on psychedelic adverse events. If anybody, Joe, I can get you that information to put on Psychedelics Today as well. But it's like we can improve clinical outcomes in the 50,000 people that are going to be in the medical model. What are we going to do about the 5 million other users that are out in recreational spaces? And where are their voices amongst us, in the community? Because those are the people who are the experts.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
I gave my feedback to PSI yesterday.
And I'm glad you mentioned, Joe, sort of the lineage of harm reduction in the space. And I would just give a shout out to Maria Mangini, who's been working on this for decades and has been like a really important mentor of mine, and has shared her Guido the Guide flyer that they handed out in the Haight in the 60s that has all the wisdom we need, right? So you're right, it's been there. I would say it's been, again, in these really informed subcultures. And so now it's just like, how do we really extend that?
Yeah. And final history bit, and then we can keep going. So I just recorded with Paul Gillis Smith at Harvard Divinity School Center for the Study of World Religions, and he is working really hard to do publish a memoir from Lisa Bieberman, who was really early at Harvard with Leary and Alpert, and created, after realizing they weren't actually all that loose with their drugs, was her primary point. And secondly, she's just started a psychedelic helpline out of her home and was helping people understand this stuff, answering the questions. Also coupons for free LSD if you came over, which is, check out the podcast. It's really fun. It just came out a couple weeks ago.
Will do.
All right. And what else has been, going on with the project? Like, I love that you're doing Boulder, Denver, and Aspen, all places with, a lot of psychedelic activity and affluence. And I think affluence plus psychedelics can be complicated.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to, we'll be at Psychedelic Science on Friday at, I think, 12:15. And on the stage with us will be Ronan Wood, who just graduated from Aspen High School. And the way he's sort of been a Before You Trip ambassador and a super strong advocate for education among his peers. I connected with him through Martha Hamill at the Aspen Psychedelic Resource Center, and she's amazing. And Ronan just sort of came, and he's like, like psychedelics are everywhere, right? Everyone, we're curious, they're being used, and I'm actually kind of concerned about risky use among my peers, and we need education. So he's just been amazing at, giving feedback and, kind of extending the campaign into his community, to your point about Aspen. The other thing I did want to say, because I was talking about measurement and all the analytics we're collecting, and I wanted to give a shout out to Daniel Kruger, who's helping. We have the most amazing steering committee. And I would just say to people, go to the website and see the steering committee, because they're just incredible luminaries in the field. But Dan
Kruger was
is
just
helping
on our live stream the other day.
Okay, yeah, he's like amazing and has pro bono put together a pre-post survey of the campaign so we can understand, like, is this doing anything? Is it effective? What's working? What's not? So we have the analytics, but what he's doing is like a much more robust measure. So I look forward to having those data as well. One thing, well, and I could talk more in detail, but I would love to talk about funding though for a minute, because people are curious, like, how was this funded? And it was all private philanthropy. So I want to say that, amazing, generous donors. When the substances were decriminalized in Colorado in 2022, I think right around that time, I had 2 or 3 people reach out to me about the need for education and concerns about funding it, because it wasn't, I think it's pointed to in Prop 122, but it wasn't funded in the proposition. And so at that time, people were just like, what are we going to do? How are we going to fund this? And it sort of didn't happen. And so I just want to point out that private philanthropy can get us a certain distance, but I really believe that public funds need to be allocated for this type of harm reduction education as we change policy. And I am, going to be speaking with the governor's office about that in Colorado and other states. And, now there's potential, I think, at the federal level with RFK and plans potentially, who knows. But funding is an issue. And so for me, that's why it's just really important to bake it into the policy so that we're not playing catch up, 2 and 3 years after policy has shifted and accessibility has increased, use has increased. It's hard to get the genie back in the bottle, and so I would like to advocate for education in tandem with policy change. Yeah.
Agreed to all of that. Also running a nonprofit. More public funding is necessary. And I know a lot of public funding is getting cut. And I know that there is, oh God, there's a huge dragonfly in here all of a sudden. I'm sorry. Like, things have to be publicly funded, especially when it comes to education, when it comes to public health education, when it comes to public safety. Like, those are things those are the things our tax dollars should be going to. Whether that's at the local, state, or federal level, those are the things that really need to happen, especially if we're going to increase access to things that could be potentially societally harmful and physically and personally and spiritually harmful. And so, but if you are a private donor and are listening to this, please contribute to either Kristin's Coalition for Psychedelic Safety or Education or to the Shine Collective, and you can find us at shinesupport.org. Shameless self-promotion is my game, and so please, if anybody is interested in supporting survivors, supporting people who have been harmed, if you yourself have been harmed, feel free to reach out to us. We are building a resource database. If this is something that is resonating with you, if this is something that feels important to you, if public safety, public messaging campaigns is something that you want in your communities, reach out to us. Like, we are happy to give you more information, help in ways to make your community safer. And so please help us.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a tough time as public funding for harm reduction and education is getting cut. It seems like there's probably going to be an acceleration in drug war spend. So, we're going to be fighting that same fight that we've fought since Reagan and Nixon. And it's going to be tough because it's what is science-based that we can do to help people is going to be more and more difficult. Yeah. Can I share a story? And I just want to, I'm really curious of feedback from you two on this. So all right, this is something that I've been struggling with for years. A friend of mine from the deep south, man, some addiction history, goes to New York City to go get a facilitated session, right? And turns out it's someone with a very shamanic inclination, somebody well regarded in the psychedelic ecosystem. I found out later when I tried to critique this person's efforts. And like, okay, so first thing, like, again, rural person from the deep south. First thing you say is, I also do BDSM work if you want that. Like before going, same day of session. And then also, I'm going to need to be touching your perineum in the session to make sure you're relaxed. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. And the kid already like traveled from the deep south. And I'm like, that's fascinating. Did the session anyway. I don't know if he got touched or not. I hope he didn't. But you know, as I go around, as this guy tried to go around, it's a classic gaslighting story, but it's I this time, right? Which is awkward and like not really what we think about. Um, and then I go, hey, like this person doesn't seem safe. And I talked to a lot of people, including business associates and friends who are relatively senior in the scene, and nobody wanted to take it seriously. Nobody said, oh, that's wrong. And yes, I'll say something. And I'm like, and you know, it's at the point where I almost wanted to call the cops on this person, but I'm like, it's not, I wasn't assaulted, but this guy, he should be empowered to call the police if he wants to. But then drugs were involved. So like police are going to be assholes about it. I don't know. Thoughts?
I'm going to make a giant public statement here, which is, nobody needs to touch your perineum. Like, nobody does. Like, unless you are going to a medical doctor for some sort of GI issue or some sort of, like, no. Don't do that. Don't let anybody non-consensually touch intimate parts of your body unless you have consent agreements well established beforehand, especially not in a power dynamic facilitated session. Ever. That is unnecessary and should not be happening. And if there are facilitators out there that want to have this debate with me, I will love to have this debate with you. Reach out and be like, I actually think it is necessary for me to touch people. And I want to hear that conversation because I want you to explain it to me like I'm 5. Because when I was a child and I was taught about personal boundaries and things like that, I was told that like I have bodily autonomy and no one should touch me without my consent, especially when I am in a vulnerable state. And so wrong. That's my like wrong. Like I want a buzzer. I want like the wrong buzzer from like whose line is it anyway? Anytime somebody makes a statement, along with if you are in a position of power and facilitation, you also should never have sex with anybody that you facilitated for. Ever. Like there's a power dynamic. You have taken somebody into a really intimate, vulnerable space because they reached out for help. And you have the responsibility to hold the boundary. And I know it happens, but your psychedelic facilitators should not be touching your genitals, should not be intimately touching you in any way, shape, or form, should not be building intimate relationship and intimate connection with you, especially if there is financial exchange. So no, flat no. And if you know somebody who is doing that, you should tell everybody that you know to not be involved with that person.
Yeah. After 20 disheartening phone calls, I was just like, all right, I guess I don't like all of the people in this scene anymore.
Oh, it's right. It's heartbreaking. That's the moral injury. That's the psychedelic moral injury that we're seeing. Go ahead, Kristin.
Oh, no, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, I would love to comment on the gaslighting part of that story. And I wonder, and I want to hear what you both think. From my perspective, in the last 5 years, it feels like the movement is more willing to sort of look at these darker side issues. It feels like that to me, and that feels really important. And Joe, that doesn't help your friend, but who sounds like maybe it was more recent. So, I mean, obviously it's still happening, but it
a long time ago.
Okay, because it does, it feels better. And I just want to say that whether you embrace harm reduction and ethical practice because it's the right thing to do, or you embrace it, because if you don't, there will be a backlash. There will be so many people and high profile people hurt that it will set the movement back. I don't care which reason you choose, but to me, gaslighting is going to be counterproductive. If you hide things and you minimize risk, at some point that cauldron is going to bubble over. So I think we just need to shine the light on it and put the dish under the cauldron and save all the bubbles and hold them dear. Look at it, learn from it, and create, safe spaces for healing or recreation or whatever you want to do. But I'm really sorry about your friend. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
And Kristin, thank you for that response, because if somebody comes forward saying, I was harmed, or I had a wonky situation, or I was assaulted by this person, the correct response to that is, I am so sorry that happened to you. How can I support you? Not, well, that person didn't harm me, or that, oh my God, how heartbreaking. Do we need to to reteach empathy when somebody is coming forward with a harmful, challenging story? It is so vulnerable for them to trust to even share that with somebody, and takes a really long time, that the response shouldn't be, well, what were you wearing? Or, right. Well, why'd you go off into the woods and do drugs with that person? Right? It's yeah, we learned this from Me Too and rape culture and everything else. The correct response is, I am so sorry that happened to you. How can I support you?
Right. Yeah. No, and I've definitely felt that personally too. So I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing to navigate this space, because there's a lot of different interests. There's money. There's also, money everywhere, from the person selling you drugs to the person making money from prison or whatever it is, right? There's a big spectrum of things going on here, and this is a big messy issue. And I I made the joke at one point, Kristin, that I was going to change the name of this show into Drug War Today, because at a certain point I wasn't talking about psychedelics anymore. It's just I was having psychedelic guests on and then just yelling at them about drug war. I was oh, this isn't helpful for them.
One of my, to add on to that, Joe, a thing that had come to me years ago, in some of the integration work that I was doing, and looking at the drug war and looking at what happened with opiates, is think about how many people have died and profited off of being able to control people's pain. I wonder how many people are going to die and profit when we realize we can control people's pleasure. And right? If that's what the opiate war did, imagine what the psychedelic war is going to do. When we give people the ability, especially with spiritual access, how many people are going to die and be manipulated and coerced and controlled when we actually have the ability to control people's access to divine experiences and pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
can I say one thing on that? Agree wholeheartedly. I'm a twice daily meditator, and I've been meditating since my son died. And truly, I've had some of the most beautiful, important, transcendent, connected experiences I could imagine. So healing. I mean, it's really literally how I've survived, the loss of a child. And I guess I want to say that too, because sometimes we get, and I've also done holotropic breath work, and experienced the most healing around the relationship with my father. I won't go into it, but incredible healing around a relationship that I wasn't expecting going into that breathwork experience. So I just want to say, for people who are curious, there are other ways in. And I also love to frame the conversation in terms of altered states that are so healing. And psychedelics aren't for everyone, or maybe you want to try some of these other practices first. I think the outcomes are generally better when you use psychedelics if you have some sort of practice. But I just, Erica, when you said when we can control, I wanted to put the onus back on the individual, because we all really do have that autonomy, connection, with or without drugs. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And I fully support that as well, is there are other ways in, and psychedelics are not for everyone. And I feel like there is some of this, I'm seeing a lot of it come up of like, kind of like the psychedelic Olympics is like, well, have you tried this one? Have you tried this one? And there's some like ego competition around it, where, oh, well, you know, you could do all of the breath work and meditate and everything else, but if you haven't taken 400 micrograms of LSD, like, have you really like tried to break your brain before? And not everybody should be breaking their brain, but there is this pissing competition in psychedelics right now, which is becoming really dangerous, which is becoming really polysubstance, which is becoming, you know, have you tried MDMA? Have you tried psilocybin? Have you tried them together? And like things like that. And then this build up that can really cause a lot of significant harm. And so making sure that you have safety measures and being able to say, you want to know something? Like, LSD is fine for me. I don't need all the research chemicals from China. Like, I don't need to try. I like it, right? I don't want to, you know, go through the entire psychedelic alphabet.
Totally. Yeah. No, that's such a good point. And I think, I mean, what we're seeing sort of anecdotally is co-use of psychedelics with cannabis, potentially triggering, because a lot of the cannabis use now, the THC concentration is so high that it can also be psychoactive, and that combination. So I mean, I know people do, but it's important to look at and think about and safeguard that sort of poly use. Yeah.
Right. There's actually a substantial amount of info we need to be educated around cannabis specifically. It's fascinating that we just kind of wildly normalized it. Like, I'm very pro cannabis, but I also think like to be pro anything, you really need to be pro education at the same time.
Exactly.
On these substances, and
yeah,
that's really like the name of the game here. And I think we're all in huge agreement that like to dig our way out of this gigantic propaganda war and war on us, we need to educate like crazy. Really, I think suing the government would be amazing, but you know, who knows what government at this point. But like, I think it's going to be interesting to see how we come together and execute on this. I've been doing free education for 9 years. You know,
you have.
I think a lot of us, you know, similarly have just been at this for a long time. And you know, how do we amplify, coordinate, and you know, get a bigger share of voice for this? Because, you know, if we just have people going, oh yeah, Matt Perry died of ketamine needs to be illegal, it's like, well, there's a lot of context that goes into that Matt Perry story, and that's like, just saying died of ketamine is so not helpful.
Right.
And
no, he actually died from abusive over prescribing.
So
like
sure.
as one of the like, right?
Yeah, and I like to go,
and
like,
he was
did
a
he
long
drown
time
from using it alone? Like, using ketamine alone in a hot tub is a fucking no. Like,
and we all know this.
No. Right. I've been tempted, but I said no. And like, I went and took a shower instead, and like, didn't drown.
Good call.
And, like, you know, and
especially alone, right? Like, especially without a sober sitter, without somebody around to make sure that you're staying safe, right? Keeping somebody, I like the Bob Jesse of like, you know, somebody's got to be able to answer the door if the cops knock on it. And so somebody's out, and you take turns. Who gets to sit for everybody right now? Right? Somebody's got to stay at ground floor.
100%.
Let's actually elevate that as a really big call right here is, if you're going to do this stuff, be safe as much as you can by getting educated and making it a team sport. To what Erica said, have someone take a time out that night and be with you.
Right. And you
Yeah.
guys can cycle through every few months. Like just like a designated driver, right?
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody needs a designated driver. Everybody needs somebody. If you are going to go off on a big experience in your mind, let's make sure that we have somebody to keep your body safe.
Amazing.
One,
All right.
one
Well,
of our messages is the 4 S's. So set, right? Check your mindset. Are you good to go? Setting, are you in a safe space? Substance, right? Which one are you taking? Larger doses are going to have bigger effects. So maybe start slow, go slow. And support what we just said, never go alone. And have the fireside hotline handy.
Yeah. Yeah, we're currently developing a mascot called Nibblers, the moderation mouse, where he just encourages everybody to take little nibbles of substances instead of large doses, because you can always take more, but you can't take less. And so, like, if you're starting out with something, like, maybe take a little nibble of it to see how it reacts in your body. And so, if somebody wants to help me design that cartoon mouse for the harm reduction movement, I would love that as well.
I love that, Erica.
Oh,
That's
man.
great.
Well, I was just talking about a cartoon avatar yesterday. So
Joe, we can put you in a full like mouse suit. You could go out there like Bleach Man from the 90s harm reduction movement.
I like costumes. Well, let's kind of wrap up here. Erica, you first. Like, where can people find your work and follow you?
Okay, you can find me on Instagram at Nest Harm Reduction or at shinesupport.org. Those are also my websites. They have link trees on them if you want to follow. If you want to follow my Substack, I just started a Substack. It is called Millennial Psychonaut. And it is more poetry and musings and commentary, less of my clinical hat on, more of my millennial psychonaut hat on. And so follow me on Substack, follow me on Instagram. You can reach out to me through any of those channels. I respond. I do all my own social media, and so if you send me a message, I will be the one responding. It's not some virtual assistant or anything like that.
Amazing. Also a millennial elder here. Kristin.
Yeah, thank you. You can find me a couple places. I wanted to give a shout out to the foundation that my family and I started. It's the William G. Nash Foundation. So williamgnash.org, and it's where we do a lot of our philanthropic work. We have a grants program for young entrepreneurs. So if there are any young people starting businesses out there, I'd love to hear from you. Just honoring Will's entrepreneurship. And then, of course, the Coalition for Psychedelic Safety and Education has a website. But mostly check out beforeyoutrip.org. I mentioned the Instagram handle Before You Trip. Follow, like, share. You know, we've got a toolkit on beforeyoutrip.org under the resources section where you can download. You can see all the creative assets. You can download them. You can post, make your own posts. We've got safety messaging, so the idea is anyone with a platform can weave safety messaging into interviews like this, presentations. And I guess just, advocate for education as part of policy, and let's do this thing.
Here's the Before You Trip _.
Before You Trip _. All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining me today. This has been a pleasure. I'm glad we can have these kinds of conversations and try to work towards the ideal drug policy future that we kind of collectively see here. So thank you all for your work, and I hope we can do more.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. Thank
Thanks,
you,
everybody.
Erica.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Chris. It's always a pleasure, Kristin.
Always a pleasure.
All right, until next time. Thanks.